speeches, maybe half a dozen a week. Some of them these days are even about sick kids or improving cancer outcomes. But today I'm speaking about something I don't often speak about in front of crowds. And to be honest, I've been dreading it since I agreed to do this 3 years ago at the last $1 Million Lunch. So I'm here to tell you about what it's like to have your happy and healthy 13-year-old daughter die of cancer after a 12-week illness. So it's not to say that I don't speak about Sinéad, we talk about her all the time. People who know me well know that I refer to her as often as any proud mum speaks of their daughter. Sadly though, I don't have a lot of new content. My Sinéad stories have been stuck in a time warp since 2014. Sinéad was excellent. She was smart and sassy. She was unusually self-assured. She was a doting and protective big sister and a loyal friend. I miss her with every breath I take. I watched the life that cancer denied Sinéad vicariously through her closest friends. Jobs and courses, tattoos, boyfriends, ex-boyfriends, the Oompa Loompa fake tan, travels and a gap year, and that weird eyelash thing that's all the go at the moment. My son calls them his backup sisters, and they are my backup daughters, and we're all very grateful to have them in our lives. So today, I want to share with you the reality of cancer in children for the 20%, not the 80% that survive, and that have a chance to live, to love, and to be loved. But the ones that may one day deliver a eulogy for their parents rather than the other way around. And please, I'm not in any way diminishing the horrific experience of childhood cancer for the 80%. The ongoing consequence of surgeries, the harm done by toxic treatments, the trauma and disruption to cognitive, physical and social development in a young life, and the impact on the family unit. Sinéad died on a Friday morning. It was the 12th of December, just a little after 5 a.m. She wasn't asleep, but she was very heavily medicated and relatively comfortable. She knew that she was dying. We'd had a quite extraordinary conversation about that a handful of days earlier. She was displeased, to say the least, but she was understanding of it and she was accepting of it. She was in her room, in her bed. Her long-time companion, a very scruffy old doll called Millie, was under her arm. Fingernails at full glamour from what was her last ever outing, a trip with me to the nail salon some 3 weeks earlier. My brother and his wife were there too. I'd grabbed a couple of hours sleep in a fold out at the foot of the bed. Some 20 hours earlier, the palliative care doctor had said this was likely the last 24 hours. So we'd set up a roster of sorts. My sister-in-law shook me awake and said, "Her breathing has changed. You have to come now." I held Sinéad's hand tight and I told her how much we loved her and how strong she had been, how proud of her we were, and that it was okay for her to go now. That we would always love her. And she took a big breath, she squeezed my hand goodbye, and then she was gone. Life at that point split into before and after. It is how I date everything. But these are some of the things that happened in the after. And please forgive me my confused tenses. So for 2 years, every morning, I woke to the same thought. What a bloody, awful, horrific dream that was. And then the very, very next stage of consciousness would stir, and I realised that it hadn't been a dream at all. Our then 10-year-old son, Hamish, experienced enormous disruption to his life, learning, and his own health. And we felt and still feel a deep guilt associated with having been unable to protect him from that. Simple and routine things changed. A new world became visible. Folding laundry into 3 piles when there used to be 4. finding a community of interest in hidden corners of Pinterest, Instagram and Facebook. There's a meme to be found in those bereaved parents groups that says, a wife who loses a husband is called a widow. A husband who loses a wife is called a widower. A child who loses their parents is called an orphan. There is no word for a parent who loses a child. That's how awful the loss is. Reading the Buddhist parable, Kisa Gotami and the mustard seed over and over. Please do share this with any parent you ever find who lives with the death of a child. Carrying eye drops and rescue remedy everywhere, just in case. This one I actually still do. A Medicare card with numbering that goes 1, 2, 4. Can't begin to tell you how much I dislike my Medicare card. I learnt to avoid things like Royal Parade, girls of any age at all, live music, birthdays. We gave up camping, sold the caravan and never returned to Bali. And then there was the gruelling cognitive behavioural therapy to learn to not avoid these things. See how the tenses are all wrong? There's no better illustration of this than trying to answer the seemingly simple question that comes up most weeks. And how many children do you have? How to answer? I have 1. No, that's not right. I have 2. Not quite right either. I have 2, but my daughter died of cancer when she was 13. It's the least worst option. It took 3 years of different permutations to settle on that as the answer. It's a pretty tough thing to inflict on a stranger, innocently asking how many children you have. But at least then I don't have to spend the rest of the day racked with guilt for erasing Sinéad. Now I'm going to return to something a bit more like work mode speech for a moment. The philanthropic community, like all of us, has shifted focus over the last 2.5 years. And unsurprisingly, investments and donations have responded to the biggest, most urgent health challenge on the planet. Organisations have had to tighten budgets. Organisations like the CCF that have built an annual fundraising plan around bringing hundreds of people together have been really significantly impacted. This means less funding for music and art therapy that Sinéad needed and that others need now. Less funding for the cancer journey beads that Sinéad needed and that others need now. Less funding for research so that fewer families have to be scarred or worse still, broken by cancer. Research that might mean kids with cancer have gentler treatments and better lifelong outcomes. I've seen the people in this room raise $2 million in an afternoon after hearing from a parent that had a child survive cancer. My challenge to you is to beat that today. For us in the 20%. Thank you.